Hello friends, welcome to my channel Clinical Biochemistry by Dr. P.K. Prabhakar. From today we are going to start a new series of lectures in which we will talk about hormones and their classification and mechanism of action for each and every hormones. One by one we will do it. So this is today the first lecture on this series. So here we are going to talk about basics of hormones and the classification of hormone. We will talk about how hormones are going to be classified. So if we'll see, first we should understand what is hormones. Hormones are nothing, it is a chemical, you can call it chemical messenger, which is normally produced by, released by a specialized cells of our body. Those cells we are going to call it endocrine cells, endocrine organs. We have many number of organ system in our body. One of these system is that is called as endocrine system. Slowly we will come to know what is endocrine system and what is their mechanism of actions. So hormones are chemical messenger which acts on different aspects of bodily functions and the process such as development and growth. So hormones have many functions, many different functions. One of the most important functions of hormone is they work for the development and the growth of our body. Other than that one, hormone is also responsible for the homeostasis of our body, to maintain equilibrium of our body, like electrolyte balance, like water balance, like acid base balance, like glucose balance, calcium balance. So many number of homeostasis is going to be maintained by hormones. So that is another important function of hormones. These hormones are secreted directly into the blood. We are going to see that this type of system where secretions will be directly into the blood, that is called as endocrine system. On that I will show you the pictures and we will come to know through the pictures. So hormones are released directly into the blood, which carries them to the target organ where it has to work, or the target tissue where it will work and it will exert their functions. So hormones are going to be transported through blood circulation, because blood circulation is the main circulatory system, transportation system of our body. Anything has to be transported from one place to the other place in our body, that will be through blood only. So in the same fashion, hormones are also going to be transported from one location, one place to the other place with the help of blood only. These hormones are required for the correct development of both animals and plants. So it is not only like hormones are going to be produced only by animals, but it is also produced by plants. And one important thing is hormones are found in almost all the multicellular organisms, and their role is to provide internal communication between cells located at different parts of the body. In our body, in the case of human body, hormones are used for different type of communications, right? So whenever we are having any kind of secretions, any kind of productions by a systems, that works in different fashions, like these are going to be called as either autocrine, paracrine or endocrine. What is difference between autocrine, what is paracrine, what is endocrine? Autocrine is when a production secretions by a cells, like this is a cells which is going to release some kind of secretions. So the product, secretory product of this cells ultimately works on the same cells. So the product of these cells works on the same cells is called like autocrine. Means the effector molecules, the production, the secretory components works directly on the same tissue. That is called as autocrine mode of actions. Paracrine mode of actions is called as whenever secretions by a secretory cells works on the nearby cells. So in this case, the secretory product which is released by a cells need not to be traveled too far. So it is working at the very nearby place, nearby locations. So any cells which is nearest, there it works. Third one is called as endocrine, where the product, the secretory product of a tissue of a cells is had to travel at distant locations through circulatory system, through blood, and then it will walk a tissue, a cells which is distantly far from the producer cells. So there it has to be traveled through the blood circulation systems. So that is called as endocrine systems. So most of the hormones, they are behaving like this one. So they are going to be released by the endocrine systems, endocrine tissue, endocrine cells, and they will travel through the blood circulations and work at the target tissue. Now, hormones are produced by endocrine glands. As I have told you, the source of hormones are endocrine glands, endocrine tissue. So in the case of endocrine, we have two types of glands. What is called as endocrine. Second one is called as exocrine. Like endocrine cells, like here, these are the cells which you can see, endocrine cells. So these endocrine cells are going to release, going to produce, going to secrete hormones. These endocrine cells are called as ductless gland. So they are called as ductless gland, and exocrine called as ducted gland. Ductless means the secretions, the product of these exocrine, endocrine tissue, endocrine cells are directly into the blood, not to the any kind of duct, any kind of vessels. So it is directly secreted, directly released into the blood circulations, and then it will travel from one place to the other place. So they are called as endocrine system, endocrine glands. Who does not have duct, who is ductless. So directly secretions will be released into the blood circulations. Whereas in case of exocrine glands, it is called as ducted gland, where secretions of the tissue of the cells is not directly into the blood circulation, but it will be through a channel, through a duct. Then this duct will be open into the circulation or open into the different places. But ultimately the product, the secretion of the tissue, the glands will be not directly into the blood, it will be through a channel, through a duct. So it is called a ducted gland. Like in our body, we have a pancreas which works both endocrine as well as exocrine tissue, exocrine glands. Like here you can see, this is the leaf-like structure is pancreas, which is having both endocrine and exocrine. This white flower-like patch you can see, this is called as, this is their endocrine portions. So these endocrine portions does not connected with any kind of duct. So any secretions by these flower like these endocrine portions is into the blood circulation. So it is directly released into the blood. It is directly secreted into the blood. Whereas this portions is called as exocrine portions, which is composed of acinar cells, whereas endocrine portions is composed of isolate of Langerhans cells, which is having alpha cells, beta cells, delta cells, PP cells. So they produces normally insulin, glucagons, PP peptides, and other hormones. That we will talk later on. But here, endocrine portions is directly going to secrete their secretion into the blood circulations, whereas exocrine portions are going to release their secretions into the duct, and through this duct it will be, this is called pancreatic duct, this will be collected into the common bile duct, and then it will release into the duodenum. So means what I want to say to here is, we have two types of secretions. One is exocrine, second one is endocrine. Endocrine are ductless, so directly secretion into the blood vessels, whereas exocrines, they are direct secreted through the duct. Now there are some similarity is there between endocrine system and the nervous systems. Like endocrine systems, we have seen the secretion of the endocrine cells are directly into the blood circulations. It is not through the channel. Similarly, in case of nervous systems also, the neuron cells, neurosecretory cells going to release their secretions directly into the blood circulations. Or whenever we have a synapse, at the synapse also the secretions will not be any channels, it will be in the synaptic cleft. So there are number of similarity and dissimilarity there between endocrine system and the nervous systems. What are the similarity, what is the dissimilarity are there? First we'll say the nervous systems is going to release the component, the product of nervous system or the secretory product of nervous system is called as neurotransmitter, whereas the secretory product of endocrine cells are called as hormones. So endocrine systems, endocrine cells produces, releases hormones, whereas the nervous system releases neurotransmitters. A neurotransmitter acts on a specific cells right next to it. So neurotransmitter does not have to travel very far distant. So neurotransmitters will be released by one neurons. It works on other tissue which is very near to them. Whereas hormone needs to be traveled from one location to the other locations through the blood vessels, through the blood circulations. So hormone has to be traveled. Neurotransmitters have their effect within milliseconds. So it is very fast actions will be there. So normally our nervous systems, neurons, very fast forward actions will be there. So it is in milliseconds. Whereas hormones takes minutes to day in their effect. Means neurotransmitters will have very small half-life. Whereas hormones will have half-life will be more than the neurotransmitters. The effect of neurotransmitter are short-lived, as I have already told you, whereas the effect of hormones can be up to hours, day, and years. Perform short-term crisis management. It very fast works, whereas endocrine systems normally regulates long-term ongoing metabolic activity and regulatory functions. Neurotransmitters acts on a specific cells right next to it. Hormones can travel to the other places. In our body, there are many endocrine systems, endocrine glands we are having from head to up to the genital organs. We have many endocrine systems, endocrine organs are there, like pineal glands, like hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroids, parathyroids, thymus, adrenal, pancreas, ovary, testis. Number of organs are there. Kidney also produces some of the hormones. So, and here we are going to see the important hormones produced by these important endocrine systems. Like pineal glands is going to produce melatonin, whereas hypothalamus produces ADH, antidiuretic hormones, oxytocins, and some other regulatory hormones. Similarly, pituitary glands have different lobes. We will talk in details, that is anterior lobes and posterior lobes. So they are going to produce adrenocorticotropic hormones, ACTH, thyroid stimulatory hormones, growth hormones, prolactin releasing hormones, FSH, follicle stimulating hormones, luteinizing hormones, and MSH. Then release of oxytocin and ADH. Similarly, thyroid hormone going to release T3, T4, and calcitonin, that is the important hormone. Thymus is going to release thymosins, whereas adrenal glands is going to release epinephrine, norepinephrine, that is called as also fight and flight hormones. Then adrenal cortex is going to release steroidal hormones, that is cortisols, corticosteroids, aldosterones, and androgens. In our digestive systems also, GIT tract also, we are having number of hormones, which is digestive hormones. Kidney going to produce renin and erythropoietins, calcitriol. Heart is going to produce ANP and BNP. Adipose tissue that is produces leptin and resistance. Pancreas going to produce insulin, glucagon, PP polypeptides. Gonads going to produce androgens, that is testosterone, estrogens, inhibins, progestins. So these are the important hormones. So one by one we will talk about each and every endocrine organs. These hormones, whatever hormones we have seen just now, these hormones are going to be classified into different categories. So normally we are going to classify hormones on two important criteria. First, on the basis of their chemical nature, and second, that is on the basis of their mechanism of actions. So first classification is on the basis of their chemical nature. On the basis of chemical nature, we are going to divide into three categories. First category is any hormones which is coming from amino acid. Single amino acid or single amino acid derivative hormones comes under the first category, that is amino acid derivatives. Second category is where amino acids will it is not composed of amino acid, it will have more than one amino acid in the form of peptides. So any hormones which is in the form of proteins, small proteins or small peptides, they are coming into the protein and peptide hormone category. And third category is that is called as steroidal hormones. These steroidal hormones normally comes or it will be produced, it is source or you can call it precursor of these steroidal hormones are cholesterols. So they comes from cholesterols. They are normally lipid solubles. This is one kind of classification. Second classification is on the basis of their mechanism of actions. So first category, that is called as group 1 and group 2. Group 1s are lipid solubles and group 2 are water solubles. Now we are going to see slightly in details about these mechanism of actions, how they works. So here the first classification was, that is amino derivatives or amino derivatives. So any amino acid, like we have norepinephrine, epinephrine, T3, T4, then we have dopamines. These are coming from single amino acids. So any hormones which comes from single amino acids, they are called as amino acid or amine hormones, like T3, T3, T4, norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine, or dopa you can call it. These are the amine hormones or amino hormones. Second hormones we have seen, that is peptide hormones. So any polypeptide chains which works as hormones are called as peptide hormones, like oxytocin, insulin, glucagon, then ACTH, number of other hormones. Then third category is steroid hormones. They are normally comes from cholesterols like testosterone, progesterone, mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, cortisols. These are steroidal hormones. Now, so we are going to see the category of each and every hormones. So we have three category. This is, sorry, here it's not visible. This is protein or peptide hormones. This is steroidal hormones, and this is amino acid hormones. So proteins hormones are normally synthesized in the form of inactive proteins. These inactive proteins are called as prohormones. So these prohormones will be proteolysis, either from C terminal ends or the N terminal ends. So some amino acids, if you remove this from these prohormones, it will give you the active hormones. So pre-hormones means it is a precursor hormones. So precursor hormones going to be metabolized and then it will give you the product. So protein hormones are produced in the form of precursor hormones, prohormones. Whereas steroidal hormones are coming from their precursor is cholesterols. So cholesterol is the main source of all these steroidal hormones. Whatever it will be steroids, testosterone, estrogen, progesterones, glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, cortisols, any hormone, they are coming from cholesterol only. And amino acids, the main source of the single amino acid which gives you many hormones, they are tyrosine, like epinephrine, norepinephrine, T3, T4. These all comes from tyrosine hormone. So you should remember this tyrosine. That is a very important. This protein hormones normally produced by the cells and it will be stored in vesicles. And these vesicles released from this vesicle into the blood will be regulated. So whenever body needs, that time only it will be released into the blood circulations. Otherwise it will be stored into the cells who produces it into the secretory vesicles. Like insulin will be stored into the insulin vesicles in the pancreatic beta cells. Whenever body needs, that time it will be released into the blood circulations. Whereas steroidal hormones are released instantly, immediately. So that is constitutive secretion, means always it is going to be synthesized and it will be released. Amino acids hormones are normally also going to be stored before it is going to be released. So it will be stored into the cells who produces it. These peptide hormones and amino acids hormones are water soluble. They are polar in nature and they are water soluble. So amino acids are also polar and they are water soluble. These steroid hormones, they are non-polar and they are normally not water soluble. I have told you all these hormones needs to be transported from one place to the other place with the blood circulation only. Because these steroid hormones are not water soluble, so it cannot be very easily transported. So these steroid hormones require certain carrier proteins. These steroidal hormones need some kind of proteins which help them in the transportation from one place to the other place. whereas proteins and peptide hormones normally they don't require it. Sometimes amino acids hormone needs it, but otherwise they are water soluble. They don't need any kind of components, any kind of secretions, any kind of peptides for their transportations. These proteins and peptide hormone, amino acids hormones, they are water soluble, so they directly cannot enter into the cells. That we will see in the details. So they binds to the receptor on the cell membranes. So here in this case also they are binding to the receptor on the cell membranes except T3, T4, because T3, T4 are exceptions. They don't bind on the cell membrane, they directly enter into the cells. That I will show you the pictures. Whereas steroid hormones, because they are lipid solubles, so they directly enter into the cells. These are the examples. How effect we will see once we will see the mechanism, then we will differentiate. Examples of peptide hormones are insulin, glucagon, prolactin, ACTH, and gastrin, parathyroid hormones. Whereas steroidal hormones are cortisols, endosterones, estrogens, progesterone, testosterone. Amino acids are adrenalines, thyroxines, triiodothyronines, epinephrine, norepinephrines. Now, on the basis of nature of messengers, I have told you it can be either water soluble or it will either it will be lipid soluble or it will be water soluble. So hydrophilic means which is uh, water soluble component. So any hormone which is any messenger which is released from a cells, from a target cells, and if it is water soluble, so they directly go to blood circulation and directly it will be transported. It don't need any kind of proteins, any kind of carrier molecules for their transportation. So they directly transported from one location to the other location. Whereas any hydrophobic messengers which is not water soluble like lipid soluble hormones or some amino acids hormones, they cannot directly secrete transported without the help of any proteins. They needs a carrier proteins. So once these hydrophobic messengers, hydrophobic or lipid soluble hormones are released into the blood circulations, they bond with the some kind of carrier proteins, that is mainly albumins. These carrier proteins or albumins normally help them into the transportation from one location to the other locations. So hydrophobic or the lipid soluble hormones normally requires a carrier proteins, whereas proteins and peptide hormones or amino acids hormones does not require any kind of carrier proteins. I have a second classification which we have seen, that is on the basis of their how it works. So we have two groups, that is group 1 and group 2. Group 1 hormones normally they are lipid soluble, so they directly enter into the cells and then do their functions. So they do the normally gene transcriptions and the transportation channels. Whereas group 2 hormones, they not directly enter into the cells, they binds on the plasma membranes and do their different kind of activity. So they do the protein modifications, protein translocations, channels, and gene expressions. Now we will see in the details. So first, group 1 hormones. Group 1 hormones are lipophilic messengers, means they are lipid soluble hormones. Because our plasma membrane is composed of phospholipids, so lipid soluble hormones can directly diffuse into the cells. Once it will diffuse into the cells, it will come directly into the cytoplasm. So they have a receptor either inside the nucleus or into the cytoplasm. Means the receptor for this steroidal hormones or lipid soluble hormones will be in the nucleus or in the cytoplasm. So these hormones will bind with their receptor. So either they have nuclear receptors, so they will form a hormone receptor complex, or they will have a cytoplasmic receptor. There also they will form a hormone receptor complex. So in any way, either cytoplasmic receptor or nuclear receptor, we have got a hormone receptor complex. On our DNA, we have a specific binding site for this hormone receptor complex, that is called as hormone responsive element, HRE. So HRE is a location present on our DNA where this HR complex, hormone receptor complex, binds. So hormone receptor complex binds and ultimately increases its protein productions, gene expressions, transcription factor activation. So whatever different activity will be there, that activity will be performed by these components. These lipophilic messengers normally have large half-life compared to group 2 hormones, which is water soluble. Now, the need to be remember that these hormones binds with the intracellular receptors. So intracellular receptor means either it will be cytoplasmic receptor or intranuclear receptors, and then it will bind to the DNA at HRE complex, hormone responsive element complex, and then do their functions. Second group of hormones, which is water solubles. These water soluble hormones cannot cross this phospholipid plasma membrane. So they cannot transport. So they have to bind to a receptor which is present on the plasma membrane. So all the peptide hormones, all the amino acid hormones except T3, T4s bind to the receptor present on the plasma membrane. The communication of these hormones will be done through another messenger which is present in the cytoplasmic side of the cells. So these peptide hormones or the group 2 hormones binds to the extracellular portion of the receptors. Inside the cells, we have another effector molecules which carry the message of these peptide hormones. That is called as secondary messengers. So because of this hormone binding, the message will be communicated to the secondary messenger, which carry their message directly or through the intermediates, and ultimately gene expression will be there. Means in this case, in the case of group 2 hormones, hormone cannot enter into the cells, into the cytoplasm. So they will bind to a receptor present on the plasma membrane. They activate another messenger in the cytoplasmic portion of the cells, which is called as secondary messengers. And then secondary messenger ultimately activated through different channels, that is called ultimately goes and works on genes. These secondary messengers can be of different types. We can have calcium, we can have cyclic AMP, we can have cyclic GMP, we can have IP3, we can have different other components. So these are different cyclic secondary messengers. So in our next lecture, we will talk about the different types of secondary messengers and how they works, how the classification of secondary messengers will be done. The group 2 hormone and group 1 and 2 hormones are divided, differentiates their number of differences. First, group 1 hormones are lipid soluble hormones, so they are lipophilic in nature, means hydrophobic in nature. Group 2 hormones are hydrophilic in nature, means they are lipophobic in nature. They are lipid insoluble. Group 2 hormones are water soluble, so they are lipid insoluble. Group 1 hormones are lipid soluble but water insoluble, such as steroids and T3, T4. T3, T4 are amino acid derivatives, but they are exceptions. They work through the intracellular receptors. They have a half-life, long half-life. Group 2 hormones are very short half-life. Receptor for group 1 hormones is inside the cells. Either it will be cytoplasmic receptor or the nuclear receptors. These group 1 hormones binds to receptor hormone complex, and then ultimately it will go and bind to the HRE complex, hormone responsive element complex of the DNA, and ultimately do their activity. Group 2 hormones normally works through the secondary messengers. That can be either cyclic AMP, calcium, phosphoinositol, tyrosine kinase. So these are the different classification. We have 4 different categories, that is called as A, B, C, and D. A means cyclic AMP. So A is cyclic AMP. B is cyclic GMP. C is calcium or IP3 inositide phosphoinositol, and D is kinase mediated. So these are the 4 different classifications of secondary messengers. So these secondary messengers we will see in the next video, next lectures, and the next day in details. So this is all about the basic classification and basic mechanism of action of hormones. If you have any query, any comments, you can write in the comment box. If you are not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe it. You can press the like button so that all the notifications will reach to you on the time.